Welcome to Alaska Weather. This is Eric calling with the National Weather Service for July 12, 2022. A couple options for you to further refine your weather search. A 1-800 number gets you into a menu system and out on the web at weather.gov/Alaska. If you have any questions, comments, or concerns, please email us there at the email listed. For the fire weather update from the Alaska Interagency Coordination Center for today, most burnable surface fuels are in western interior today. Weather is moderating for the rest of the state of Alaska. Depot fuels remain dry. It will take several days of significant rain to get them wet. And for the outlook, westerly flow aloft will bring increasing rain showers to most parts of Alaska this week and next. For the hazardous weather outlook, we do have a watch out for the eastern range through Wednesday morning, and this is for excessive rainfall yesterday, and that lingers into today, and so we'll look for some high flows through that area, and please take note of that before you head outside. Taking a look at the satellite information today, looking at that little low moving out of Bristol Bay across the Alaska Peninsula into the Gulf of Alaska. Otherwise, we have some, you can see that enhanced cloud activity there in the eastern interior, driving some of those heavy rainfall. We also have that weak front pulling through the Brooks Range, driving some mixed precipitation up that way. Otherwise, a lingering low just south of the Panhandle and moving out that way. So what does this look like on the surface chart? 1,002 millibar low there just southwest of Kodiak Island, driving some moderate to light rainfall, otherwise rain showers through the southwest, smoke through the interior, some thunderstorms, and again some mixed precipitation across the Arctic coast with some fog. With that, we also have that low out there just south of Alaska Peninsula, 1,009 millibars there, and ridge 5 pressure out there in the Bering Sea, driving some marine stratus. For tonight's weather, that low in the Gulf now 998 millibar with a cooler front showing up there, some lingering rain showers at the Panhandle. Thermal trough continue to drive some rain showers through the interior. Some smoke will be noted as well. Otherwise, a weakening low and frontal boundary up in the Brooks Range. High pressure now over the eastern Aleutians, 1,020 millibars there. For Wednesday afternoon, looking at that low in the Gulf, continue to press into the central portions of the Pacific, the Gulf of Alaska there, with some rain showers continuing in the Panhandle, some smoke continuing in the interior around that thermal low, and that frontal boundary now a trough over the Brooks Range, driving some mixed precipitation up that way, and some fog continuing to linger in the northwest coast. And that low coming out of eastern Russia, 1,006 millibars there. High pressure remains over the Aleutians with some marine stratus associated with that system. For Thursday's weather, we get a new low there in the central Aleutians, 1,005 millibars there with a warm front, cold front. Otherwise, that low in the Gulf now pressing forward towards the Panhandle, driving some moderate to possible heavy rain into Canada. Otherwise, some lingering showers across the Alaska Range, southern mainland, and some fog along the Arctic coast. For low temperatures, Wednesday morning looking at 52 for Ketchikan, 51 in Sitka, 50 in Juneau, 55 in Anchorage, 53 in Homer, 53 in Kodiak, 50 in King Salmon, 56 in Fairbanks, 50 in Eagle, 53 in Fort Yukon, Anaktuvuk Pass, 32, Ukqiavik, 33, Point Hope, 44, 48 in Nome, 49 in Galena, Tanana, 49, Aniak, 53, Dillingham, 53, Cold Bay, 48, Shimei at 46, and 45 in St. Paul. For high temperatures Wednesday afternoon, looking at 61 in Ketchikan, 59 in Sitka, 61 in Juneau, 64 in Anchorage, 63 in Homer, 60 in Kodiak, 69 in King Salmon, 67 in Fairbanks, 71 in Eagle, 65 in Fort Yukon, and AKwx Pass 40, 38 there in UAFTV, Point Hope 49, Nome 55, Galena 67, 66 in Tanana, Antioch 65, Bethel 66, 69 in Dillingham, 55 in Cold Bay, 50 in Shemya, 53 in St. Paul. For low temperatures, Thursday morning looking at 52 there in Ketchikan, 50 in Sitka, 49 in Juneau, Anchorage 54, Homer 53, 52 in Kodiak, King Salmon 52, Fairbanks 51, 47 in Eagle, 47 in Fort Yukon, 32 in UAFTV, 48 in Nome, 50 in Galena, Bethel 52, Cold Bay 48, Dutch Harbor 47, 47 in Shemya, and 45 in St. Paul. Lastly, for high temperatures Thursday afternoon, 62 in Ketchikan, 60 in Sitka, 65 in Juneau, 62 in Haines, 63 in Anchorage, 63 in Homer, 62 in Kodiak, King Salmon 61, Fairbanks 66, 65 in Toke, and 64 in Eagle, 37 in UAFTV, and 67 in Tanana, 57 in Bethel, 55 in Cold Bay. For CPC, 6 to 10 day temperature outlook, July 18th through July 22nd, looking for cold temperatures to come back for that area. Pretty much across the state for cold temperatures favored throughout much of the state of Alaska.
And now, aviation weather around Alaska.
Taking a look at the aviation forecast, starting with flying weather on Wednesday morning, looking at some IFR conditions along the north slope of the system passing through that region. Otherwise, ridging over the Bering Sea and Aleutian brings some marine stratus there and IFR conditions. Otherwise, low in the Gulf of Alaska brings some IFR conditions in that area. Also some marginal conditions through much of the Panhandle into the southern mainland. For Wednesday afternoon, flying weather, looking at continued IFR conditions there on the north slope, continued IFR conditions across much of the southern Bering and into the Aleutians, and also some lingering IFR conditions there in the southern Panhandle associated with that low moving through the Gulf of Alaska. Otherwise, some marginal conditions through the southern mainland, likely some smoke in there as well. And for flying weather on Thursday morning, looking at some IFR conditions continuing on the Arctic coast and through the Bering Sea and Aleutians, and some marginal conditions through the southwest and in the southern mainland, and portions of south central with some IFR conditions there. Also some IFR conditions over the southern mainland and southern Panhandle. For flying weather on Thursday afternoon, IFR conditions along much of the north slope, Arctic coast there, IFR conditions again across much of the Bering Sea and Aleutians, some marginal conditions through the southern mainland, and IFR conditions over the portions of the Panhandle. For past conditions on Wednesday, AKwx went for IFR conditions, same for Adigan. Lake Clark and Merrill in the southern end of the Alaska Range, looking at IFR with slight improvements to marginal. And Rainy went for IFR the entire day there. And for Windy, looking at IFR conditions improving to marginal with areas of isolated thunderstorms. And then for Isabel, VFR decreasing to marginal. And Mentasta, VFR decreasing to marginal with thunderstorms possible, isolated across the north entrance there. For past conditions down in Tanita, marginal. And for Portage, same kind of conditions there. For Chilkoot and White, went for marginal conditions down in the northern Panhandle. For freezing levels, Wednesday morning, looking at anywhere between 2,000 feet to 8,000 feet along the northern portion of the mainland associated with that system passing through there. The surface freezing level cuts across the Arctic coast there. Otherwise, 10,000 foot freezing level just off the southwest coast and at the end of the Alaska Peninsula and up into the Gulf of Alaska. Otherwise, over there in the Panhandle, anywhere between 6,000 and 8,000 foot freezing levels. For icing conditions on Wednesday, looking at 9,000 feet and above over portions of the north slope there, with that system moving through. Also above 7,000 feet, slight chance there for isolated moderate over the coastal mountains there in the Panhandle. Otherwise, relatively good conditions across much of the mainland. Jet stream conditions for Wednesday, looking vertically stacked lows all across the state. One there across the Brooks Range, northerly flow on the backside of that system, 45 to 50, and counterclockwise flow. Another low in the Gulf of Alaska, bringing continued northerly flow through much of the Bering Sea and into the Gulf. And then light and variable conditions across southern mainland and Panhandle. And counterclockwise flow around the other low out there just south of the western Aleutians. 9,000 foot winds. Again, these lows are vertically stacked. Low in the Gulf, bringing counterclockwise flow, high pressure over the Bering Sea, northerly flow through much of the Bering Sea there. Anywhere between 40 and 20 knots across the eastern Bering Sea there. Another low out there just south of the western Aleutians, but otherwise across much of the mainland. Generally light and variable conditions. For 3,000 foot winds, again, low pressure systems. There is a system expected to come in to picture from eastern Russia, but otherwise light and variable across much of the mainland and the Panhandle. And for turbulence on Wednesday, looking at a few areas of isolated moderate conditions possible over the southern Alaska Peninsula and below 6,000 feet there over the southern end of the Panhandle, but otherwise pretty nice conditions statewide.
I can't really name anyone that has so much integrity as she does to the things that she's accomplishing. It's pretty amazing. Having Claire as a role model, just a strong woman in science and just so smart and so kind. It's just a huge confidence booster. Is that, hey, I could do that too, you know? That's possible, that's successful, that's what I want to do.
I would characterize her as a pioneer in the field.
The amount and quality of the work she's put out is second to none.
I know people who have a lot of tenacity. I know people that have integrity, but it's rare that people have both together in that, that combination that Claire does.
Every morning, Dr. Claire Parkinson gets up before sunrise and runs 2 miles to work. She hasn't missed a day in nearly 40 years. To know the evolution of sea ice and how we observe it from space is to know Claire. This year, she's celebrating 40 years at NASA.
When I arrived at Goddard, which was in July of 1978, it was an incredibly exciting period here. Satellites were pretty new, but a lot of data had been collected.
NASA scientists were inundated with information, and Claire was in a cohort looking at sea ice, trying to make sense of a jumble of very raw, very new data. It was around that time that Claire and her team, at the time led by Dr. Jay Zwally, created the principal sea ice record that we use today. How does something like that record help you do your job?
Oh, that record is fundamental to understanding sea ice. So without it, we wouldn't know how rapidly it's changing.
You may not realize it, but Claire's work studying the changing extent of the ice caps deeply affected our understanding of climate change, and relatedly, our understanding of how climate change affects life on Earth.
One of the clearest signals for climate change that resonates with people has been this shrinking of the polar ice cap in the summer that we're able to see because of Claire's work.
After we had a record that was about 15, 20 years long, we started noticing that the extent of the ice in the Arctic was getting smaller over time.
Sea ice is formed on the surface of the ocean and therefore is made from seawater. The biggest concentration is in the Arctic, and it's also where the biggest loss in sea ice is occurring. Every year, NASA reports on the sea ice minimum and maximum extents. As expected, the data is concerning.
By now, not only has this trend toward lesser ice continued, but it's even accelerated, so that now the decreases are greater than what they had been.
These trends are deeply troubling, but one thing's for sure. Our awareness of shrinking sea ice extent due to climate change was propelled faster and further after Claire Parkinson arrived at NASA.
I mean, she takes her job seriously, and the health and welfare of those instruments in space, yeah, she's on it. You know, it's one of the things you don't worry about because Claire's in the loop on these things. It's going to be fine.
In science, we stand on the shoulders of giants, on the shoulders of those who explored before us. But then, some among us are giants.
For a scientist, it's incredibly exciting to be studying these glaciers and ice sheets right now because they're doing something that hasn't happened in thousands of years. We're watching changes take place that haven't happened since the end of the last ice age. Tuesday was cold, I almost froze my toes. Oh, what's it gonna be next week? Who knows? That's climate. Oh, that's the climate you got. You take a bunch of weather and you average it together and you're doing the climate rock.
At a glacial pace, it means something's happening so slowly you can barely tell it's happening at all. That used to describe the very incremental movement glaciers and ice sheets experienced each year. But now that's changing. We're tagging along with 3 NASA scientists to understand the different lengths they go to not only investigate ice sheets and glaciers, but also communicate their often complicated science to the public. First, let's get oriented. Ice sheets, in pink, pretty much occur in only 2 places, Antarctica and Greenland. Glaciers, in yellow, play a key role draining melt off the ice sheet. Glaciers are also found in the high mountains, but we'll get to those in another episode.
So we know that something's happening in Greenland right now that's unprecedented in the last several thousand years.
That's Dr. Josh Willis, oceanographer at the Jet Propulsion Laboratory. Josh and his team are tackling one of the major environmental challenges of the 21st century, trying to answer fundamental questions about how melting glaciers impact sea level rise.
With my mission, Oceans Melting Greenland, or OMG for short, we're trying to understand just how much of Greenland's melt is caused by the oceans.
Along with being one of NASA's top scientists working on the cryosphere, Josh is passionate about demystifying climate change in typically unconventional ways.
I think by reaching out to people with a little bit of humor, a little bit of fun, maybe a song, you really have the opportunity to help people understand and come to terms with what we're doing to our planet. Because it's definitely happening and it's definitely a big deal, and we need to start preparing for it.
Down at the opposite pole, Dr. Kelly Brunt is getting ready for a major expedition.
In December and January this coming year, I'll actually be in Antarctica down near the South Pole collecting ground-based GPS data.
This is actually Kelly's second expedition to the South Pole. The first occurred in December and January of last year. Both surveys are critical and will help validate data collected by NASA's airborne campaign, Operation Icebridge, and the recently launched satellite mission ISAT-2.
All three of these layers, that ground-based, that airborne, and the satellite, are all tied together. The ground-based helps validate both the satellite and the airborne helps give us more validation data for the satellites, but also a bigger story with respect to the depth of the ice sheet and what's going on underneath the surface.
While some scientists are taking measurements in the field, others are looking for answers in physics and lines of code.
For me, those projections that we are doing, they do have a very personal meaning.
Dr. Sophie Nowicki is an ice sheet modeler. That means she and her team have the important job of forecasting how ice will change in the future, which also predicts changes in sea level rise. It's a job she doesn't take lightly, especially since urban planning and infrastructure use her team's models to make decisions about the future and safety of their communities.
When we make those projections that are 100 years in the future, 100 years can seem so far away, like I don't have to worry about it, it's just too far. But actually they are not. It's really like the future that we are looking at that our children or grandchildren will see to experience.
Whether it's learning to communicate in new ways, traversing a swath of Antarctica in a massive piston bully, or taking responsibility for an impactful climate forecast, our NASA explorers are pushing the limits of discovery every day. But on a very human level, they're people with families and friends who have a stake in finding out why and how the planet is changing as rapidly as it is.
Every place, at least so far, that we have found life, we found water along with it. And so when we try to understand the thresholds for life, where life might exist elsewhere in our solar system and the universe, water is one of those things that we look for.
And now, marine weather around Alaska.
Taking a look at the marine forecast, starting with the ice edge, we can see some further lower concentrations of ice on the southern end of the ice pack up there in the Arctic. We can also see some lower concentrations of ice forming just off the Beaufort Sea coast, but otherwise ice-free conditions down through the Bering Strait. For Wednesday's marine forecast for southeast, winds for the inside waters generally from a southerly direction 10 to 15 with seas as high as 3 feet. Outside waters, winds generally from a southerly direction at 20 to 25 with seas as high as 7 feet. And for Thursday, inside waters, winds generally from the south at 15 to 30 with seas as high as 8 feet. Look for small craft advisories there on the southern end of the inside waters on Thursday. And for the outside waters, looks like we might be looking at a small craft advisory out there too. Winds generally from a easterly direction up to 25 with seas as high as 9 feet. For the south central area on Wednesday, for the Gulf region, winds generally from the east at 15, light and variable up to 10 in Prince William Sound. Otherwise, seas across the Gulf region 4 to 5 feet there. And for the Cook Inlet region, winds generally from a southerly direction 20 to 25 with seas as high as 7 feet. Look for a small craft advisory in the central part of the Cook Inlet there for Wednesday. And then for Thursday, for the Gulf area, looking at variable winds up to 10, seas as high as 4 feet. Prince William Sound, variable there too, up to 10 with seas as high as 2 feet. And for the Cook Inlet region, winds generally from the south at 10 to 15 with seas as high as 3 feet. For Alaska Peninsula, Kodiak Island, Wednesday, winds around Kodiak Island generally from a northerly direction up to 25, anywhere between 20 and 25, seas as high as 8 feet there in some areas. Otherwise, south side Alaska Peninsula, winds generally from the northwest at 25 with seas as high as 8 feet. So look for small craft advisory there on Wednesday. And for the north side Alaska Peninsula, winds generally from the west at 20 with seas as high as 5 feet. For Thursday, winds around Kodiak Island generally from the west at 20 with seas as high as 6 feet. And for the south side of the Alaska Peninsula, winds generally from the west at 15 with seas as high as 5 feet. And for the north side of the Alaska Peninsula, winds generally from the west at 20 with seas as high as 4 feet. For Alaska Loosen chain on Wednesday. Winds look like they're going to be mostly variable, anywhere from 10 to 25, with seas as high as 6 feet there just south of Unalaska. And for Thursday, winds pick up a little bit from the south at anywhere between 20 and 25 knots, seas as high as 8 feet there near Nikolsky. For Wednesday's marine forecast for the west coast, looking at winds generally from the west at 15 to 30 with seas as high as 8 feet there near St. Matthew Island. Otherwise, for Thursday, looking at winds generally from a variable direction at 5 to 20 with seas as high as 7 feet, actually 25 feet, up to 25 knots there just south of Nunivak Island with seas as high as 6 feet. For Wednesday's marine forecast for Arctic coast, looking at winds generally from the north there across the Beaufort Sea coast, anywhere between 5 and 10, and down through the Chukchi Sea coast, winds generally from the east at 10 with seas as high as 2 feet, down through the Bering Strait, winds generally from a variable direction 10 to 15 with seas as high as 6 feet. For Thursday's marine forecast for the Arctic coast there along the Beaufort Sea coast, looking at winds generally from the west at 10 to 15 through the Chukchi Sea coast, winds generally from a northerly direction up to 15 with seas as high as 3 feet, and down through the Bering Strait, winds variable with seas as high as 4 feet and winds up to 10 knots. So Thursday's weather, looking at a low that's crossed across from the Bristol Bay region into the Gulf of Alaska, 998 millibar low there with an occluder front. Out ahead of that system, lingering showers across the panhandle, thermal trough in the interior, so smoke in that region with showers continuing, especially across the Alaska Range. Otherwise, a weak cold front moving through the Brooks Range, bringing mixed precipitation up there. And some fog along the northwest coast, otherwise ridge poking into the eastern Aleutians. And kind of same scenario on Wednesday with a low tracking further into the Gulf on Wednesday.
These forecasts are for planning purposes only. Call 1-800-WX-BRIEF for a formal pre-flight briefing. Always file a flight plan before you go flying. The U.S. Coast Guard Auxiliary urges you to leave a float plan with a friend or the harbor master before you go boating.